Welcome to Codex, a history of video games. My name is Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week, we're jumping back into our Zelda coverage for part 4. Mike, you got a lot of games to cover today. This is a beefy notes document. I'm really excited to get going on this.
This is a full beef note. That's gross. You can't say that.
Full beef.
Full beef notes. No, we're going to be talking more about Zelda. This is going to be a long series. I hope people are into it. I hope so. Give us your feedback. codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, if you're sick of hearing about Zelda or you're sick of hearing about Metal Gear Solid, let us know.
And we'll take little breaks. So there are going to be 4 games we're talking about, but 2 of those I put asterisk next to them because we're going to talk about Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, which are a combo. Came out at the same time. 2 different games, though. Came out at the same time. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to talk about Link to the Past 4 Swords Adventures, which is a remake, but it did this 4 Swords Adventures thing, which was the first time Zelda ever had multiplayer. Crazy. And then in the end, we're going to top it all off with the Wind Waker.
Oh, yeah.
So let's get into it. So the Oracle series of games, that is Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, started as Nintendo was thinking of re-releasing the original Legend of Zelda to Game Boy Color in 1999. Eventually, though, it was decided that they'd just make 3 new Zelda games instead. 3? That's right.
What?
I said 3. Because while we end up with 2 games, one of those 3 is canceled partway through development. Spoilers.
Oh, it's
kind of
so
skipping
sad.
paragraphs. But this all started with Yoshiki Okamoto in 1999. At the time, he was the head of Capcom. That's right, you heard it. Capcom's screenwriter subsidiary called Flagship. He was speaking to hero of the podcast, Shigeru Miyamoto, and proposed to remake the original Legend of Zelda for the Game Boy Color. So his proposal was approved in a big way because Okamoto was able to then develop 6 Zelda games for the Game Boy Color. He got asked to do 6 of them, not just the one remake. 2 of them would be ports, so we're looking at the original Legend of Zelda, but then also 4 new original titles. Ooh. Because when you think about Game Boy Color is like kind of the perfect system for a Zelda game. Top-down Zelda.
It really is.
It's perfect. So Okamoto wanted to release them in a quick succession, like 4 to 5 months apart, maybe. So the idea of remaking the original game was important to Okamoto because he felt that young people should be given the opportunity to play the original Legend of Zelda because it's a hallmark of a game, you know? Not to mention the fact that if the remake was a success, then Okamoto knew like he could do a bunch of sequels, even like a direct sequel to Link to the Past, which would be crazy. So, from the start, Okamoto did things differently. So we've talked about it before on the show, I think. Miyamoto, his design philosophy for creating a game was essentially do gameplay systems first and then do the scenario writing after. Flagship was different. They actually started with scenario writing first, and then they would do the gameplay elements after that. So some of the staff members on the team, they were led by director Hidemaru Fujibayashi, and he was responsible for tasks other than the storyline. He actually wanted to skip the remake and create the original Zelda game right away. Spoilers for him, might work out, okay? As the original game was deemed too difficult for the new generation players. We've kind of run into this a lot where people like...
What is this? Yeah.
Where like Japanese developers think that games are too difficult for players and they'll quit when people love a challenge. Look at Dark Souls, okay? Everyone loves a challenge. So more and more changes were applied to the point that this Legend of Zelda remake had an entirely different world map. So as a result, the team ran into problems because the scenario and the maps had to be reworked constantly to make it so it fit with the old plot, and it was just kind of a mess. Also, the Game Boy Color screen was a hurdle for them too because the earlier Zelda game had a wider ratio than the narrower Game Boy Color. Like the television was wider.
Oh, yeah, because television's like 4:3. Is a Game Boy Color like a 1:1?
I think it is.
I'm
it's
like
a square. It's a square screen, I think. I'm pretty sure it is. But players could not view an entire room without having to scroll through the room, and it made it really annoying to solve puzzles. Like think about it. You walk into a room and there's edges, and you have to walk to those edges just to see like chests or stairways or clues. And I think we can all agree that clues are pretty important to solving a puzzle.
it's almost a fully square screen. It's 160 by 144 pixels, so definitely much more square than a standard television.
I'm going to say it's a square because I want to stand
Yeah,
by
that's
what I
pretty close.
said and not be wrong. There's nothing wrong with this way of thinking, right? Sure, why not?
No,
okay.
of course not.
Development was slow on this Zelda title, so slow that Okamoto got frustrated to the point where he had to ask Miyamoto for help. And Miyamoto decided to switch things up a bit. He proposed a trilogy of games. Each game would have a different gameplay element focus. This trilogy, that was referred to at the time as the Triforce series, was named after the Triforce, a relic that it's pretty much in like every Zelda game almost.
Yeah,
I
it's
feel
a pretty
like.
big deal.
Yeah, if you're unfamiliar with the Triforce, let me break it down for you. Here's the idiot's guide to using the Triforce. The Triforce is composed of three parts. The Triforces of power, the Triforce of wisdom, and the Triforce of courage, each of them combined together to make the real deal. Now, each game in the trilogy proposed by Miyamoto would associate with a different piece of the Triforce. So there'd be a wisdom game, a power game, a courage game, with one game being the conversion of the original Legend of Zelda. So the first game was demonstrated actually at Nintendo's Space World trade show, which is the coolest name for a trade show. Space
Yeah.
World? That's awesome.
They
In
haven't done it in
1989.
like 20 years too, man.
They should bring that back. I'd go to Space
They
World.
should.
It was under the working title of, here comes Mike butchering Japanese again, Fushigi no Konomi. And it was this action-oriented game. It was concerned Ganon's theft of Princess Zelda, and you used the Rod of Seasons, which was a new item in Zelda in which you'd like take the seasons and you'd like change them. So in the story of this demo, the seasons of Hyrule were into chaos and you had to use the Rod of Seasons to like bring it back. So this was actually a precursor to the plot of what would become Oracle of Seasons, but this was the playable demo. This was the first iteration of this game at Space World Trade Show. Link would solve puzzles using the Rod of Seasons to manipulate the environment and change the current season. So an example that's used a lot is like, hey, you see a lake, you can't cross it, make it winter, now it's ice, you can walk across it. It's like kind of that like thing. So
Makes sense.
this focused on color-based. Oh wait, sorry, it's Chie no Sho was a part of the game which focused on color-based puzzles, and Yuki no Sho, which was used to solve like times of day to solve puzzles, were not shown. So it only showed the seasons portion of the game, not the time one or the color one. In the US, though, these names would be changed to Mystical Seed of Power, Mystical Seed of Wisdom, and Mystical Seed of Courage, respectively. So it was like seasons, colors, and time, or power, wisdom, and courage was how they
Makes sense.
mix it together. Okay. So the games actually interacted with each other too. That was going to be the whole idea behind this, is you'd play all the games to get the full plot, which is really cool. And it still applies in Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. There's a system they have there that you use to, if you beat one game, they give you a password to go to the next game and it changes things, which is pretty neat actually, especially for a Game Boy game.
Yeah.
So players could begin with any of the three games, and the actions in the first game would affect the story of the other two, like I just said. So it was a concept conceived actually by Okamoto. More than 10 of Flagship's scenarists, which is actually like a name of people that make scenarios, scenarists, which I think is pretty cool. I never heard that word before. One of them was a Resident Evil writer, Junichi
cool.
Miyashita. Yeah, he worked simultaneously on all three stories at once. The developers actually considered using a cell phone adapter to transfer data over, but instead decided to do the password system. So, like I said before, you beat the game, you get a password, you use the password before you start the next game, it changes some things around a bit to show that you've beaten the game before it.
Yeah, and I think that's the only way to get to like the real final boss.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. The limitations of this system, though, had difficulty in coordinating three games, and it was like super complicated. So the team actually scaled back to two games, and this is where one of the games is canceled.
Oh, rest in peace.
Rest in peace, unreleased Zelda game. As the prospect of multiple endings, it gave you like replayability and stuff, and it was attractive, but three games was just really confusing. So Oracle of Seasons came from Mystical Seed of Power, and Oracle Ages came from Mystical Seed of Wisdom. So actually I said it wrong before. And Courage, Mystical Seed of Courage, which was the one based on color puzzles, was canceled. So they kept time and they kept the seasons, but they got rid of the color-based puzzles.
Bummer.
It is kind of a bummer. But these design changes actually made it so the release dates of both games kind of went kind of close to the Game Boy Advance. They were like, oh, are we going to come out on the Game Boy Advance? Or are we going to come out on the Game Boy Color? The next system, this was the next system in the Game Boy line, and it actually is backwards compatible with Game Boy Color games. I don't know if you remember that. If you had an old Game Boy Advance, like the first iteration, its slot would fit a Game Boy Color game or a Game Boy Advance game. I had one. It was glorious. I don't know where it went.
Mm-hmm.
The team considered using special functionality to the game only when played on Game Boy Advance, but it was afraid that the additional development time required for the edition would cause the games to be released after the Game Boy Advance came out. So once the Game Boy Advance date was postponed, that gave them the time to make it so it would play more stuff on Game Boy Advance than Game Boy Color, but it was still released on Game Boy Color. It's a Game Boy Color game. There is no Game Boy Advance cartridge for this game. It's a Game Boy Color cartridge that happens to play on Game Boy Advance with extra stuff. So, staggered releases were actually abandoned because they actually wanted to release the games simultaneously because they felt like this would keep the style consistent between the two, and it would also make it so people wanted to get both. It's a marketing thing. You know how it is. Each game was shipped on an 8 megabit cartridge, except in Europe, it was 16-bit. They got more megabits. Why did they get more bits?
Oh, man.
But the music was composed by actually 2 employees of the Japanese music and sound effect production company Pure Sound, credited under the pseudonyms M. Adachi and Kyopi. Nintendo artist and series regular Yusuke Nakano, he actually designed some of the characters, and he incorporated previous creations he had from Ocarina of Time into Oracle of Seasons and Majora's Mask into Oracle of Ages. So there's a little throwback.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, that's really neat. Regarding the plot, by the way, in Oracle of Seasons, the Triforce transports Link to the land of Holodrum. That's right. You're not in Hyrule anymore, where he sees Onox kidnap Din, the Oracle of Seasons, hence the game of the game. In Oracle of Ages, the Triforce transports Link to Librina, where Varin possesses Nehru, and Link has to beat these. In both games, there's 8 dungeons, okay? And you got to get either essences of nature or essences of time. And in those dungeons, there's bosses, and it's a Zelda game, and you probably have to hit something in the eye 3 times. It's just the way it is, okay? It's Zelda. It's the way it is. Chronologically, by the way, if you're wondering, for all our Zelda chronology nerds out there, this game is actually 3rd in line in the hero is defeated timeline. So this actually follows Link's Awakening, but is before A Link Between Worlds, but it's in that timeline where you hypothetically did not beat Ganon or Ganondorf in Ocarina of Time. That's where we're at.
Okay.
So
making a mental note here.
Make a mental note. You put that in your chronology scrapbook.
In my bomber's notebook of Zelda things.
You actually don't you have the Hyrule Historia book?
Yeah, there's a history book, there's an art book, and there's one more book that I'm not sure, I can't remember what it is, but I should look at it again.
I wonder if it's as confusing as I think it is. So
it's pretty confusing.
Now, you might be asking yourself, hey, Mike, what are these games? You have to explain what they are. Okay, so they're your classic old school magic of top-down Zelda, just like original Zelda, Link to the Past. It's top down. It's awesome. Who doesn't love it? You find items, you solve puzzles. In Oracle of Seasons, the special item in the game is the Rod of Seasons. Like I said before, you can change the seasons with it. You can walk across that icy lake. Before it was summer, now it is winter. You can walk across the ice. And meanwhile, in Oracle of Ages, the weapon is the Harp of Ages, and you can play the harp to manipulate time and travel between the past and the present, which is actually kind of cool because you can learn 3 different tunes to it. The Tune of Echoes activates time portals at fixed locations. The Tune of Currents enables Link to travel from the past to the present without a time portal. And the Tune of Ages allows Link to switch between the 2 time periods at almost any location on the map.
Nice. That sounds a lot like the Light World and Dark World stuff going on in Link to the Past.
Yeah, it's exactly a lot like that. They love their alternate worlds in Zelda games. Big fans.
Yeah, they do.
So, another important gameplay note, actually, that I think is kind of cool, is Oracle of Ages actually focuses more on puzzles, and Oracle of Seasons actually focuses more on action.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Yeah, so if you're like an action hero fan, you want to play Oracle of Seasons, and if you're a puzzle person, you want to play Oracle of Ages. I mean, you still fight enemies.
And if you're a Zelda fan, you want to play both.
That's right. That's what you really want to do. Each is a complete game, and they are capable of interacting with each other. Like I said, you use the passwords or a link cable with 2 different Game Boys to do it. Those are your 2 options. So
Neat.
after you beat one game, for example, you get a password, and you can play an alternate version of the other game. I think this is really cool. I kind of want them to bring this back with some other games. I think this is kind of a neat way to do it. In that version, some characters mention passwords that you can use again and give to the characters in the first game, and you can exchange those passwords for items or upgrades. And by taking a password back to the linked game, the item or upgrade can be transferred between the 2 games.
Whoa, that's really cool.
Yeah, you can also trade rings with the password system, or you can randomly create like by 2 games with a game link cable. You can you can connect. I think I think it says like. Hopefully, I'm not saying this wrong, but I think it can actually connect other games, and it does weird things.
Oh, kind of like the Knuckles Sonic and Knuckles cartridge, where you could just put other games in the top of it and then play like random levels of this mini game from Sonic 3.
Yeah, I think that's what it's saying there. I think I wrote that down. I hope I did that right. Anyway, we'll see. There's also some other stuff in the alternate version, like there's plot points that are changed and expanded upon. I don't really think I need to actually get into all these. I wrote them down, but now that I'm looking at it, I don't think it really needs to be a thing. After you beat the alternative game, though, after you beat one game and then beat the other game, you get a password that gives you a victory ring. So it's like, you defeated Ganon. Here's a ring. Yay.
Neat.
Both of these games were released in Japan on February 27, 2001, North America on May 14, 2001, and in Europe on October 5th, 2001. So all 2001 games. And guess what? Spoilers, they did well. Oracle of Seasons and Ages were critical and commercial successes. They sold 3.96 million copies. I think we could just say 4 million each in Japan. And they were the 3rd best-selling Game Boy Color game in Japan with 746,000 copies sold. I love how Japan just doesn't sell as many games because there's not as many people at this time.
Just a smaller place.
But critical reviews were also super favorable, and I had to go to Game Rankings because they didn't have Metacritic at this time, or at least Metacritic didn't record it, but it got a 91.37% for Oracle of Seasons and a 92.2% for Ages. They're both good, though. I don't think that really matters. The scores are different. I think you'll enjoy it. Did you play these games, Tyler?
You know, I did not. I really didn't play them at all. I started playing, started playing Oracle of Seasons shortly after I played Link's Awakening again, like 10 years ago on an emulator, and I was just kind of sick of the Game Boy Zelda format by then, I think, so I didn't continue with it, but it was fun. Like, it's cool, and I would really like to one day play one of them, and then take the password and play the next one, because I think that's just a cool system.
This is just, like, to me, itching for a combo Switch release.
Oh,
like
yeah,
you get
dude.
2 for 1, like both of them in the same thing, because their games are small. You can put them both on one download.
Yeah, that would be really
cool. One
cool.
game. I would love it.
I wonder how many people thought that Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages were basically the same game with minor differences, like Pokemon Red and Blue, because it was out. I mean, I guess 3 years after Pokemon had come out in the U.S., but I know that there were a lot of games that sort of did that around that time, where they would release 2 slightly different with different colors. I wonder if people thought that was the case with Zelda, or if they knew they were 2 full games.
Well, that's what I thought, Tyler. That's what I was getting to, is I didn't know they were separate games.
Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to jump ahead of you.
No, you got me. I mean, it's not in the notes. This is just my own thought on it. I had no idea they were separate games when they came out, and I was like, why would I buy? I'm tired of this. Why are you trying to do 2 games at once when you can just give me one with all the stuff in it?
Yeah.
So I wish I could play these games. Again, I'm like you, though, where there's so many games out there now. Like, I'll talk about it later, but I was losing my mind today trying to find a copy of the Wind Waker online. So we'll talk about it later.
Okay.
So now we're on to the next game, or games, because there's 2 games in one here. Link 4 Swords Adventures. So this is definitely a remake. Mostly a remake. So just like in Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past and 4 Swords was a collaborative development effort between Nintendo and Capcom. The process was supervised by Minoru Narita, Yoichi Yamada, Takashi Tezuka, and Yoshikazu Yamashita from Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development. We love them. We love those people. In
Sure
that
do.
department. They do some great stuff. A Link to the Past portion actually reused the art assets from the Super Nintendo Entertainment System version, which I think is pretty cool. But
That is really cool, especially for a handheld.
there were some alterations made to the game. Some of them are like item location tweaks, so you couldn't exploit the game like speedrunners would in the original version. There was a reduction of the viewable playing area and the inclusion of voice samples from Ocarina of Time. Isn't that cool? They use like voice
That's
noises.
very cool.
Because you got to have like a hat in there every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
What's even the point if you're not going to have a hat like that? When you like sword fights? It's pretty good, I think. I've been working on that all day. Capcom had begun development of The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap in 2001. We'll talk about that next week. But temporarily suspended this whole development to free up resources for Four Swords multiplayer component, which I find fantastic. I didn't play this game either. We're going to get to it. But the company designed the multiplayer portion to force cooperation between players in order to progress. And I think that's genius. So they designed the levels so that the puzzles would adjust themselves based on the number of people playing. So if 2 players were connected or 4 players were connected, then the puzzle would require 2 players or 4 players to beat. It actually had like so many different things in it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I thought that was really hard to design.
Really hard to design is my guess. Yeah.
I wish they'd do that for Destiny.
They really should. Oh. Four Swords differs graphically from the other portion and actually kind of has more of a Wind Waker cartoony style to it, which I think is pretty neat. It was released around that same time, as we're about to talk about soon. But Four Swords was not initially planned as the first title in a sub-series. The story actually intended to be like the earliest in the series chronology at the time of its release, was already considered to influence future games. So this story takes place before Ocarina of Time. So very, very early in the chronology. The prologue actually shows Link and Zelda approaching a sword in the pedestal called the Four Sword. After Zelda explains its history and the creature that's sealed within the sword, the creature named Vati breaks open, takes Zelda to marry her because early video games have a really unhealthy relationship with love and couples and romance. I just don't understand why. They still do it. But Link then is encountered by 3 fairies who tell Link to pull the Four Sword out of the stone, much like the Master Sword. When he pulls the sword out, he inadvertently creates 3 copies of himself that fight alongside him. So they actually made the multiplayer component canon in the game. This is the most impressive thing to me about
That's really cool.
Four Swords. Yeah, it's actually in the story that 4 Links are running around. And your job is to find the 4 great fairies who will grant you access to Vati's palace, and that's how you defeat the game. After finding the 4 fairies, you enter the palace, you battle Vati, and then Vati is so weak, he is trapped in the Four Sword again forever, and Zelda and Link then return the Four Sword back to its pedestal. No harm, no foul, nothing happens, everything's fine.
Spoilers.
Right? I'm sorry. Spoilers on a very old game again. Oh man, it is almost a 20-year-old game. That's kind of depressing.
Yeah.
Four Swords actually features gameplay similar to A Link to the Past. It actually focuses on cooperative multiplayer, though. So let's say there's 2 to 4, like you and me, Tyler. You and I are in this dungeon together.
What we're doing? Four Swords.
Yeah, what we're doing is it's just the 2 of us. We're working together. We got to compete to collect rupees, and the player in the end of the puzzle with the most rupees gets a prize. But all those rupees are shared, so no matter what, we're still having a good time. Also, players are given respective colors. So there's a green Link, a red Link, a blue Link, and a purple Link. And when all players are connected, player 1 chooses one of 4 stages available to play on. All the dungeons are randomized before playing the game. The dungeons have 3 levels each of them and a portal at the end of each level to the first. And if you reach it, you'll be rewarded with a heart container. Yeah, you go up 1 health point. You gotta love that. The 3rd level is actually not a traditional dungeon, but more of a boss battle. So it's kind of cool. You actually have like boss battles in this game with your friends. And once you defeat the boss, you go back to the hub area, pick again. Unlike A Link to the Past, where Link has like inventory items that he can hold, Four Swords actually only lets 1 player hold 1 item at a time, which is actually really smart because now you have to work together even more. And you can switch items out at pedestals. The original item, called the Nat Hat, causes Link to shrink, and you can access areas he couldn't normally reach. He makes you a little tiny baby Link, and you run around.
Oh, kind of like the Minish Cap.
That's right. This was featured in a later game, The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap. Hey, there you go. You really nailed that one, Tyler. Was in the form of a talking hat named Ezio in that game. We're going to talk about that game next week. Some features in this game are linked with A Link to the Past. For example, when the players learn a new sword move, it is transferred between the games. So you actually get stuff in A Link to the Past from Four Swords Adventures. Another link between the two games is that when both games are beaten, you can actually enter a dungeon called Palace of the Four Sword in A Link to the Past and do a new dungeon. So it incentivizes you to beat both Four Swords Adventures and also beat Link to the Past, the remake.
That's cool.
This is really cool. Four Swords Adventures was released worldwide, not individually in different countries. A worldwide release, December 2nd, 2002. The game was a top seller in Japan following its release. It was the second highest title in number of sales the week of its release and was number 6 the following week with 0.04 million units sold. What a weird way to list that. 0.04 million units. Isn't that like 40,000?
Yeah, that's like a weird way to list that.
Yeah. It sold 1.63 million copies in North America as of December 27, 2007, and 300,000 copies in Japan as of December 27, 2009. Did you like that math, Tyler? How fast I did that reading math just now?
Very good, very good.
Thank you. Critically, the game is also super well received. It holds a 95 on Metacritic. That's really high.
Does that take into account the Link to the Past portion as well?
I think so. I mean, it's all it's all bundled in one game.
Yeah.
So I would think so. I didn't really check on it, though. I probably should have checked on that. Do you want to check on it for me right now?
I think you're right. I think it does.
All right, cool. So a remaster of Four Swords released for a limited time on Nintendo's DSiWare service as The Legend of Zelda: Four Swords Anniversary Edition. This came out on September 28, 2011, and it includes new content like single-player mode. So you could play actually the Four Swords version in single-player if you have no friends. It was also re-released.
Sounds like the way to go.
Right, you know.
'Cause I don't have any friends.
It was
Except
also,
you, but you live too far away. Link cable doesn't go far enough.
I know. Could we play 3DS online? We probably could. It was
We might be able
re-released
to, yeah.
on the 3DS, actually, on the eShop for a limited time from January 31st to February 2nd, 2014. And that was actually done to celebrate A Link Between Worlds, the release of that game. So there's not much else to say about Four Swords. Like I said, it's mostly a remake of A Link to the Past, but what made it super exciting to me is it made multiplayer canon in Legend of Zelda by making it so when you pulled that sword out, it made you 4 people. I thought that was really cool. I just really, really, really liked that a lot.
That is really, really cool. It did get a GameCube version, right? It might be a very different game. I don't know.
It does. I didn't know if that was a sequel or not when I saw that.
I'm not sure how it fits in. Yeah, I'm not sure how it fits in because I haven't played either of them. But
because I didn't talk about it here, though, I plan on doing it when we get to it, though. So I bet you I'll talk about it next episode because we're getting into GameCube now, and so all the Zeldas are going to be talked about there.
Sounds good.
So, The Wind Waker.
Oh, yes.
This is like a personal favorite of yours, right?
It really is, yeah. I love this game.
Excellent, because I've never played it, and I would argue that it's probably the most underrated Zelda title. Would you agree with that? But now maybe it's rated normally. At the time, it was underrated.
I think on release it was underrated, and now people have sort of grown wise to the fact that it is, in fact, a fantastic game.
Yeah, it's definitely considered a masterpiece by Zelda fans out there, for sure. Development began in 2000 for The Wind Waker, with Nintendo's Zelda team initiating plans for a new game early in the development of the then new GameCube system. Development actually on The Wind Waker started before Majora's Mask was finished for N64. Eiji Aonuma, director of Majora's Mask, returned to lead the project, while Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka served as producers. Early concepts generally followed Ocarina of Time's designs. The graphics were enhanced for the new system, but it looked a lot like Ocarina of Time. An important thing that actually happened, in which kind of caused all the anger around the graphics of this game, is at Space World in 2000, gotta love Space World,
Oh, yeah.
They showed a clip of Link fighting Ganondorf on GameCube, and it looked amazing. It looked so good. It was like a better looking Ocarina of Time. People loved it. Everyone was like, wow, this is crazy looking. It's going to be the next Zelda game. It's going to be just like Ocarina of Time. I love it so much. But the problem with this demo is the Zelda team just were kind of tired of it. They actually found they were exhausted from that style and format of kind of more realistic Ocarina of Time, Hyrule, and they wanted to switch it up. And in fact, Aonuma hated the demo. He found it derivative of past Zelda games. There's actually an IGN article that I'll talk about later that I referenced a lot of the Wind Waker stuff on. And in this interview with IGN, he said, quote, "I saw that movie and I thought, no, this isn't Zelda. This isn't Zelda at all," he says. "I felt like this wasn't what I imagined Zelda to be. It wasn't the Zelda I wanted to make. That video clip didn't actually contain any big surprises. There wasn't any kind of revelation going on. It was more like a continuation of the previous version." So in his mind,
right.
he's like, why would we do another Ocarina of Time? Which is exactly what led to the magic that
That's
is
what
the
everyone
Wind Waker.
wanted, was another Ocarina of Time. That's all anybody wanted.
They didn't do another Ocarina of Time, and I actually am really happy they didn't, because there's some really cool stuff in this. I didn't know about it. So the team actually explored other directions. They got, where are we going to go? We don't know. But then one of the designers, Yoshiki Haruhana, he created a cartoonish drawing of a young Link that caught the developer's eyes. The design manager, Satoru Takizawa, actually drew up an enemy moblin in the same kind of art style, and then the team seized on the new gameplay and combat possibilities by this new stylized cartoon aesthetic. So to achieve this look, they decided to use cell shading because it made the game look more like an interactive cartoon. And the developers built the game with Alias / Wavefront's Maya 3D tool, which made it look even more like a cartoon, custom game engine kind of thing. So they built their own engine for this game. With the choice of this adorable cartoony art style, development proceeded super quickly. The team actually quickly chose the game's island setting in a sprawling ocean because they figured this would make interesting visuals and mechanics in the cel-shaded style, and this in turn inspired the central sailing feature, which is a big part of Zelda's The Wind Waker, wind, sailing, all that stuff. Some features did draw skepticism. For instance, producers Miyamoto and Tezuka requested an explanation for the character's gigantic eyes. And the team actually jokingly suggested having Link shoot laser beams from his eyes. But what they decided on to make the eyes make sense is if you actually get stuck in the Wind Waker, look at Link's eyes, because he's usually looking at the object and giving you a hint of what you need to do next. I didn't know that.
That's so cool. Yeah.
That's such a cool gameplay thing. If you look at the character, he's like, "Hey man, look over there. Come on, you can do it. There's a rock over there. Pick it up. You can do it." Nintendo presented a demo clip of the new game at the 2001 Space World from August 23rd to August 26th. Gosh, Space World. Space World. The response to the cel-shaded design... Space World, but Space War? Space World. While some attendees actually enjoyed cartoony Link, there was a lot of backlash from disappointed fans because they all wanted that realistic Zelda they saw in that 2000 demo. I would, in fact, argue that if they didn't do that demo and they knew they were going to do the cartoony style, none of it would have been a big deal.
Yep, I can agree with that too.
It's just because they showed off that game that everyone's like, "Oh, look what you could do." Critics actually derisively dubbed the Wind Waker Zelda, cel-shaded Zelda. Miyamoto was actually surprised at the response, and he decided to limit revealing any further information about the game until the team finished a playable demo. And he hoped this would shift focus from the graphics to the gameplay. And Miyamoto introduced that playable demo at next year's E3 on May 22nd to 24th, 2002, alongside another upcoming GameCube Zelda, Four Swords Adventures. We talked about that a little bit earlier.
Coming back around.
Coming back around. Miyamoto actually encountered glitches while he tried to demo Link's new ability to use the enemy's dropped weapons, but regardless of those glitches, reception was very positive and way more positive than the Space World demo, and the game actually received the 2002 Game Critics Award for Best Console Game at E3. The whimsical style was compared to A Link to the Past and promotional artwork from previous Zelda games. The E3 demo also introduced like new features. So for example, you could connect your Game Boy Advance and you could get help from Tingle, the fairy in the game, through your Game Boy Advance if you connected it there. Also, some of the art direction continued to divide audiences, though. This was just, I mean, it's going to happen. There's angry fans, because I think we can all agree fans are the worst. Fans can be the worst. How can you love something if you hate it so much? I don't understand. Star Wars, I'm looking at you, okay?
Yep.
But if there's one thing we can all agree on, fans can't embrace change, or better yet, even give change a shot and try change. That's one thing we've all learned from video games and pop culture recently. Development continued.
And if they can, they get all upset that it's the same thing, or that it's too different.
Yeah, they're like, it's too different, I can't handle it. So,
or it's just the same thing again. Anyway.
You're just doing it. Yeah, it's the same thing over again. Development continued through late 2002. And the targeted release date of December in Japan and early 2003 in North America stayed true. During the final stages, they actually had 2 dungeons that fell behind schedule, and they were cut. And they were replaced with this quest to recover Triforce pieces found around the Great Sea. And this Triforce quest makes people so mad.
It's because it's awful. It's like, let's go to the castle and defeat Ganon. And it's like, oh, but you need to go find the maps, and then you need to use the maps to find the pieces, and it's a mess. It's awful, and it really cuts the momentum of the game. It's the worst part. Even though the game is great overall, that is definitely the worst part. And
in the HD remake, I'll mention it later, but they definitely streamline that Triforce quest because it's a problem by so many people. So the cool thing about this fact, though, about the quests, the dungeons being cut, is they actually used elements from those dungeons in later Zelda games. So in that IGN article on the history of the Wind Waker, Aonuma says, I'm aware that lots of users wanted those 2 missing dungeons to be implemented in Wind Waker HD. But to be honest, we've already used those 2 dungeons for other titles after Wind Waker already. So right now, technically, they don't really exist anymore. That was his example. But
well, that's cool that they used them in other games, though.
He goes on to say that we didn't exactly use them as is and implement them into another game. We'd add some of their features to other dungeons, so they're in different dungeons now. And actually, the IGN article speculated that we probably see these dungeon features in Twilight Princess, Phantom Hourglass, and maybe even Skyward Sword. Like, those are the games. If you want to guess where they came from, they probably came from there.
Yeah.
Look for something with wind, is my guess, because they love wind.
There's the
Wind
whole
Waker.
Sky Temple in Twilight Princess. I bet that was cut from
Wind Waker. That could be it, yeah. So on October 15th, 2002, Nintendo revealed the game's Japanese subtitle called Kaze no Takuto, or Wind Baton is what it roughly translates to emphasize the role of wind in the game. And the English title, The Wind Waker, on December 2nd, 2002, was announced. In the gap between the Japanese and North American releases, the designers did rework some segments of the game, and notably, they shortened the very long and tedious Triforce quest. So imagine
that
it was
the
even
shortened version.
It was even longer in the Japanese version. Isn't that
Oh
crazy?
my gosh!
So chronologically, according to the Legend of Zelda, Hyrule Historia, Tyler's book that he wrote. Just kidding, he didn't write it. I'm just making it up. Okay, the Wind Waker takes place in the quote New World timeline. One of the several parallel universes, or timelines, I should say, in which Zelda games are set following the events of Ocarina of Time. The game follows the adult Link timeline after the Hero of Time. So you defeat Ganon, and then this is when you travel back to your childhood, but now you're an adult in that childhood. The crisis emerges when Ganon returns, but Link does not. So centuries later, the people live on islands in the Great Sea. They preserve Link's story as a legend, but his kingdom's fate is unknown. No one knows what happened to Hyrule in this future timeline. The main character, though, in The Wind Waker is a young boy who's also named Link, and he lives on Outset Island. And on Outset Island, boys dress in green like the Hero of Time when they come of age. So it's still linking, it's just in the future, in the timeline where Link wins in Ocarina of Time. I know It's confusing, but I tried to explain it. It's so They didn't really make it easy on us. You know what I mean?
Nope.
So Link is actually celebrating that coming of age when Wind Waker starts. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a gigantic bird drops the pirate Captain Tetra into Outset Island's forest. Link
Oh
then
my
rescues... Link
Don't you hate it?
I hate it when that happens. When I'm just chilling in the forest and a pirate falls down. It's so annoying. And they gotta rescue him. It's the worst.
Yeah.
So Link actually rescues Tetra from the monsters, but the bird then, the big bird, carries Link's sister, Errol, away. Oh no. And then Tetra agrees to help Link find his sister, and they sail to the Forsaken Fortress, where the bird, the Helmarok King, is what it's called, has been taking girls with long ears. Again, why with all this girl kidnapping stuff? I just don't get it. Anyway, Link finds Errol and other kidnapped girls, but the Helmarok King captures him and takes him into a mysterious man in black that may or may not be Johnny Cash, who orders Link thrown into the Great Sea. I added that one part. I don't know if it's true or not, but why not? Keep the mystery alive. So, The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker is an open-world action-adventure game, just like Ocarina of Time. The control scheme is actually comparable to Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, where you can control Link in 3 dimensions from a third-person perspective, and like the previous
Pretty much
games,
exactly the same.
Yep, the Wind Waker features the targeting system, but it's not Z targeting anymore, because I don't even know, is there a Z button on?
Yeah, there is a Z button. It's like the R1 button on the GameCube controller, but...
Is that how you target in Wind Waker? I never
it's
played
not.
it.
Nope. You use the L button to target.
Oh, so...
I think they call it L targeting, too.
Oh, that's good. At least they make it easy that way.
They might have done. I know for sure in the remakes of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask that are on GameCube, they change every instance of Z targeting to L targeting.
Oh, I mean, that's better, you know, make it more clear.
Yeah, well, you don't want it to be confusing.
There is one unique feature in Wind Waker that's different, is you have more control of the camera in Wind Waker.
Oh, yeah, because you've got the joystick.
The C-stick.
Yeah.
So there's also on-screen meters that track Link's health and magic, just like the old games. Link can expand his health by using heart containers, yada, yada, yada. You all know this stuff. So the game world of the Wind Waker is divided into 49 sections of a grid called the Great Sea. Each contains an island or an island chain. Some of them must be explored to continue the story, while others are just optional. You can just go exploring. Kind of got a Breath of the Wild feel to it, you know? This might be like Breath of the Wild before Breath of the Wild, huh?
A little bit, because it's got cell shadedness and the world is super open. It also shares with Breath of the Wild the fact that, so right before Wind Waker, we talked about how they had that realistic looking tech demo, and then right before they announced Breath of the Wild, they had another realistic tech demo of a Zelda game for the Wii U that never materialized as well. So when people joked when that tech demo came out, they were like, "Oh, Breath of the Wild cell shaded, confirmed," and it was.
I think it's better because it makes it like timeless, you know?
Yeah, I like it a lot.
So the Wind Waker has several dungeons. There's large areas, you know, where you got to solve puzzles, fight enemies, find items. There's bosses.
Yeah, it's only got like 4 or 5, I think, compared to like the 8 that's in like a standard Zelda. So it's a little short.
Yeah, that is kind of short. So you could just.
But they make up
through.
for it with the Triforce Hunt.
That's true. When make up for it is a strong word. Okay.
Yeah.
In addition to the main story, there's also side quests in the game. There's minor objectives you can complete. There's also a Picto Box, which is an in-game camera, so you can take pictures, and that helps you fulfill some of the side quests, which is fun. Throughout the game, you acquire weapons and abilities. Items are often needed to reach certain places, so you get like a grappling hook, and you have to use it to get past obstacles, and you defeat a boss in the Dragon Roost Cavern dungeon with it. But then those same items have special like uses on your boat, which is really cool. I didn't know that. That's so cool. So another thing you could use also is the Tingle Tuner, which is what I was talking about before with the Game Boy Advance Link cable. So you can get a second player character. Or a second player can control Tingle, and you can play Tingle, so you can play it 2 player.
I think he can like help you find treasure or something on the ocean.
Yeah, and now we're going to talk about wind and sailing, because we just talked about the ocean. So a significant portion of the game you spend sailing on your talking boat, the King of Red Lions. I like that your boat talks.
Yeah.
Is that something you enjoyed of the game?
I did enjoy the talking boat.
So the boat's sail is driven by wind, and it blows across in one of 8 directions. And your tailwinds will give you top speed, obviously. Well, if you try to sail into the wind, you're going to have a bad time, pretty much. The Great Sea features enemies and obstacles different from those found on land. Some of the items serve new purposes, like I mentioned before. So that grappling hook that I mentioned earlier is used as a crane to get sunken treasure.
Neato.
Link explores the sea with the help of the sea chart, which can be updated with information on each square and island. Through the game, Link acquires additional charts pointing the way to treasure chests and other significant locations. And on land, dungeons also have similar maps to the sea chart as well. I think all dungeons in every Zelda games have had a map, right?
Yeah, I think so.
So early in the game, you receive the Wind Waker, though. This is the special item. This baton allows you to control the wind and harness other powers by conducting specific melodies. The player controls the Wind Waker by moving the joypads to change the pitch and time signature. The first melody, the Wind's Requiem, enables Link to change the wind's direction, so you could pretty much sail anywhere. It breaks it a little bit. You defy the laws of nature. Look at you. Link can learn 5 other tunes for the Wind Waker, and each of those provide special abilities. Like you can warp to different regions, and you can turn night into day, and all sorts of stuff. Yada, yada, yada. The music in the Wind Waker was composed by actually 4 people. Kenta Nagata, Hajime Wakai, Toru Minagishi, and Koji Kondo.
Friend of the podcast,
Koji Kondo. The sound team was significantly larger than that for the other projects because they wanted to make it so you can get high caliber work in a rushed development schedule, which I thought is a good idea. Because, video game development, it's crazy. Koji Kondo, the primary composer of the entire Legend of Zelda series, as we talked about before, he actually contributed to the score, but didn't really serve as a sound director. But he's on it because, one, he helped, but also there's so much of the older pieces of music from the Zelda games that he wrote modified into the Wind Waker, which I think is really cool. The Wind Waker was released on December 13, 2002 in Japan, March 24, 2003 in North America, and May 2nd, 2003 in Europe, and finally, May 7th, 2003 in Australia. Poor Australia. They're always getting it late.
Getting the games late. It's too bad.
The Wind Waker generated the most successful pre-order campaign in Nintendo's history at the time, but sales did not live up to expectations. Director Aonuma noted that the purchases were disappointing in both Japan and North America. Japanese sales suffered from a general decline in the video game market, and this was caused by consumers shifting away from games, which is a phenomenon known as, quote, gamer drift. I'd never heard that before.
Never heard that term before, yeah.
So the overall market remained strong in North America, but the Wind Waker sales were slow, and they actually declined markedly by the time they reached 1 million sales. The Wind Waker sold 4.6 million copies total, which is good, but not nearly as good as the 7.6 million copies set by Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, that's a hard record to beat.
Really is. You can't live up to that. You got to just keep pushing and make really good games. That's what they've done. Nintendo of America attributed the game's comparatively weak North American sales in large part to the cel-shaded graphics, because apparently this turned off a lot of players, particularly older teenagers who made up the Legend of Zelda's traditional audience.
Yep.
Miyamoto further blamed a failure to introduce major innovations to excite established players or attract new ones. So he didn't blame the graphics. He blamed the gameplay. He's a very gameplay-oriented guy.
I blame the graphics, at least personally. I know that's why I didn't pick it up until many years later, was because I was like, I want Ocarina of Time 2, and you give me this cartoony stuff. And I was like 14 years old when it came out, so I was like, this is kid stuff. And then I threw it in the trash.
So full of angst, my young Tyler.
And then I went and listened to, I don't know what was, Linkin Park. That's what I was listening to then.
Oh, yes. Crawling in your skin, those wounds.
Yep.
They would not heal.
They would not heal.
What's funny about this whole experience with the sales is the game is critically super well received. Like Metacritic
That's
has it
because it's actually super good.
Yeah, Metacritic has it as a 96 out of 100. With 80 reviews total. That's really good. Having 80 reviews usually brings that way down. People just got super butthurt about the cel-shaded graphics.
Yeah, that's really it, I think. Like, Miyamoto's not wrong when he's like, oh, it doesn't have any major innovations. And that's true, but I don't think it needed those. I think the reason people didn't buy it was because it looked like a cartoon, and that's too bad.
Yeah, and I mean, it did. The whole sailing thing is a major innovation to me, so...
Yeah, I don't know if I consider it a good thing. Like, I mean, the sailing is kind of fun, but yeah, I don't know.
Does it start to get...
Yeah, it starts to get a little bit like, oh, I got to go all the way across the map. Okay. And you just start to get a little, like, not looking forward to it. But they did change that up in the remake on the Wii U a lot. They gave you a red sail that makes you go like twice as fast, and that makes those sections a lot more fun.
Does it start to feel like the horse in Red Dead Redemption?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that happened to me. I was like, I'm really tired of riding this horse around everywhere.
Yeah,
so,
even though the horse riding is really cool in that game.
It is really cool.
It's just like, after a while, you get sick of just how long it takes to get anywhere.
So you just mentioned it, but we're going to talk about some re-releases. Specifically, the only re-release, I don't know why I said both. It is not plural. There's just one here. The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker HD for the Wii U. This actually featured high-definition graphics and improved lighting, but they also made some gameplay changes. For example, quality of life is just easier. The Swift Sail, the red sail that Tyler just mentioned, allows you to sail faster. They also streamlined the Triforce quest even further. They improved the Picto Box, and they replaced the Tingle Tuner, which had original... Because the Game Boy Advance is not a part of the Wii U anymore, with the Tingle Bottle item that connected to the Miiverse. Of course, this only worked prior to the shutdown of the Miiverse in November 8th, 2017. So, all you Miiverse fans out there, I'm so sorry. Wow, this game needs a Switch port. That's my response to this whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely needs a Switch port. This one and Twilight Princess HD are the best versions of those games, and it's too bad that you can only play them on the Wii U, Nintendo's least successful console, except for the Virtual Boy.
They would just print money, you know what I mean? If they just made these. It can't be that difficult, right? There's no way.
I mean, game development's hard.
I mean, yeah, I guess. I always say that.
Try to shy away from being like, it can't be that hard. It's like, well, somebody there is making those decisions, and they decided that it was not worth the effort.
There's some guy sitting at a computer for 20 hours a day, and I'm like, it's not that hard, right? You're having fun.
Yeah.
I'm just that guy.
Fine, right?
If you want to know more about the Wind Waker, by the way, the IGN article I'm referencing, it came out in 2013 when the HD version came out. It's called The Story of Zelda Wind Waker, and you should check it out. It's got some more interview stuff with Anume in there, and it's not really as much a history as it is like a person, like the author's personal reflection on how much the game meant to them for GameCube, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was really great, and you should check it out. Tyler, what you been playing?
Well, spoilers. We're recording this very shortly after recording.
We really are.
Last week's episode. So I haven't played anything at all in between these two episodes being recorded. So I'm sorry to be so boring, but I just haven't.
I played one thing. I beat Spec Ops: The Line.
Oh, man. I
put
need
in 5 good hours into it, and that's how long it took me to beat it.
Oh, man. That sounds... I need to play that. I just hear such good things about it.
It's got a crazy bananas story. I'm not going to say anything about it. You don't really think it's bananas, and then you're like, that was bananas. And then you watch a bunch of YouTube videos. That's the natural progression of how you play that game.
And then it becomes even more bananas as you watch these YouTube videos?
Pretty much, because it's like theories of what the creators of the game wanted it to be, and then there's what other people have done with it. I don't want to get into it because I don't want to ruin it, but I probably will do a history on this game with full spoilers at some point. So just know that.
Okay, I'll have to play it first then, so that
definitely.
Spoil me.
I mean, 5 hours, it's not too bad.
Yeah,
it's definitely
a long afternoon.
I think I did it in 2 sittings. I did it once the day before for like an hour, and then I just plowed through it the next day.
Nice.
And the only problems with the game I found is sometimes the cover aspect of it is a little iffy at times, and I just died because I hit spacebar and I wouldn't go into cover. But other than that, I had a good time.
Nice.
So, thank you so much for listening to the episode, and let us know if you have any thoughts on Wind Waker, Four Swords, or Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. You can email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. There's no emails this week because we're doing this so short. I'm sorry, people that are going to email us. Hopefully.
We'll have a lot of emails next week.
We will. So, you can also follow us on Twitter at @mecoletta or at SneakerElf, ELPH. That's for Tyler. And rate and review and subscribe to us and wherever you listen, and tell your friends about us. That's all we ask. Thank you so much for listening. Tyler, you want to say bye to everybody?
Yeah, goodbye, everybody.